Welcome to How PubMed Works selection. Today's class is about what's in PubMed and how it gets there. To understand the contents of PubMed, we need to understand where PubMed fits into the NLM collection. On this slide, I have a diagram of concentric circles. These circles represent the sets of bibliographic records for journals in our NLM systems. The largest set is the NLM catalog. A smaller subset is the NLM Journals collection, and a subset of that is PubMed journals. You may know that the NLM catalog provides online access to NLM bibliographic data for books, electronic materials, and most importantly for our topic today, journals. The NLM Journals collection consists of the journals that we collect the complete contents of, either starting with the first issue or at another point set by the NLM. The NLM catalog includes records for journals that are not selected for the NLM Journals collection, which is why the NLM catalog circle is larger than the NLM Journals collection circle here. We'll review why that is later in class. PubMed, the NLM's online journal citation database, represents the most visible subset of the NLM journal collection. So let's review the contents of PubMed. PubMed facilitates searching across three NLM products: Medline, PubMed Central PMC, and the NCBI bookshelf. Medline is the largest component of PubMed, as represented by the big blue disk on this slide. Medline consists primarily of citations from journals indexed for it. It does not include the full text of those articles. However, links are often available to other resources with the full text, like publisher websites and PMC. Another component of PubMed is PMC. Today, we'll discuss three different types of PMC content that appear in PubMed results, including archived journals, author manuscripts, and preprints. First, PMC contains the full text for journals selected for the PMC collection. PMC also includes author manuscripts that are deposited in PMC to comply with public access policies. And currently ongoing is a preprints pilot that makes preprints of NIH-funded research available in PMC. All of their disks are a different shade of green because these three make up the contents of PMC. However, they have distinct selection processes and policies, which we'll review later. Additionally, PubMed includes records for chapters, reports, and books from the NCBI bookshelf, represented by the purple disk. There is overlap between the contents of Medline, PMC, and bookshelf because resources can be indexed or archived in more than one, which is why each part of the database on this slide is outlined with a dashed line. This class will cover the differences and similarities between the processes and policies NLM has in place for each component of PubMed. PubMed exists within a complex publishing landscape. Three features of the publishing landscape I want to focus on today are the volume of publishing, the growth of open access, and public access policies. The first feature is the volume of publishing. Biomedical and life sciences research continue to outpace other fields in the number of articles produced. Therefore, those trying to index and archive this literature, like the NLM, are always trying to keep up. In addition to an increase in the volume of publishing, journal publishing models have evolved over the last 2 decades. We'll touch on 3 of those today. First, the traditional subscription model, where the reader or a library pays a fee to access contents of a journal, is still quite common but is decreasing in dominance. Next, an open access model means that the complete contents of a journal are made available under a Creative Commons or similar open access license for no charge. And finally, a hybrid model is where the full contents of a journal requires subscription access, but individual articles may be made available under an open access license. All of these models come into play when we talk about PubMed. The third feature of the publishing landscape that affects PubMed content is public access policies. While open access typically describes a journal's publishing model, public access refers to funder or organizational policies that mandate authors make publicly funded research results freely available. The National Institutes of Health played a key role in the start of this movement in requiring researchers to make their results free to the public via public repositories like PMC. In August 2022, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy announced that federal level departments and agencies are expected to update their public access policies by 2025 to make publications and research funded by taxpayers immediately available to the public. Sometimes organizations have open access policies that function very similarly to these public access policies. For example, a university might adopt an open access policy that encourages faculty to either publish in an open access journal or deposit their accepted papers into a university repository. These policies have made more and more articles freely available online through repositories such as PMC. To review, the three features of the current publishing landscape that influence PubMed content, and I would like you to keep in mind today, include the volume of publishing, the growth of open access publishing models, and public access policies. The NLM Collection Development Guidelines provide a transparent and publicly accessible set of criteria that we use in reviewing and evaluating the many journals that come to NLM. The guidelines include a journal selection policy that applies to Medline, PMC on the journal level, and Bookshelf. NLM uses these criteria to select the journals we acquire, preserve, and make accessible to NLM users. First, the collection development guidelines include guidance for the specific types of science that fall within the collection scope, including what NLM considers biomedicine, healthcare, and many areas of the life sciences. Next, we'll review the main components of the NLM journal selection policy as outlined in the collection development guidelines. First, we evaluate the journal's publication operations to ensure it has an ISSN and a title, is formatted as a collection of articles, and demonstrates regular publishing. Additionally, the selection policy states that journals should publish specific types of content, like original research, reviews, case reports, or data. Next, through its policies and processes, a journal should demonstrate good editorial quality, evidence of scientific rigor, editorial independence from the sponsor when commercial funding is received, diversity in authorship of articles, including a low proportion of articles authored by editors and editorial board members, and elements that follow best practices for the objectivity, credibility, and scientific quality of its content, such as well-defined methods for selecting articles, a transparent peer review process, author and editor conflicts of interest policies, and other ethical policies, as well as article-level statements indicating adherence to these policies. Finally, NLM also expects journals to conform with the guidelines and best practices promoted by professional scholarly publishing organizations. These organizations include the Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, ICMJE, the Council of Science Editors, CSE, and other groups like NISO. In addition to reviewing the individual journal, NLM staff review publishers that are new to NLM to determine whether the publisher is eligible to have their journals in the NLM collection. First, NLM will only consider an application from an organization that has been publishing scholarly content for a minimum of 2 years. We look to see that publishers follow guidelines and best practices from professional organizations, including the ICMJE's recommendations for the conduct, reporting, editing, and publication of scholarly work in medical journals, and a joint statement by COPE, DOAJ, WAME, and OASPA titled Principles of Transparency and Best Practices in Scholarly Publishing. And we look for accurate information, evidence that the publisher knows how to operate a journal, and evidence that journal content is actively maintained. If they don't pass this review, the publisher may reapply after a period of time. Some publishers may make misleading claims or engage in other fraudulent practices. Others simply lack the knowledge or resources to produce a scientific journal of the quality required for Medline or PMC. Now let's focus on the journal content that comes to PubMed from Medline and PubMed Central PMC. All the selection criteria and processes described up to this point apply to journals selected for both Medline and PMC. Medline is the largest component of PubMed. It currently contains more than 31 million citations from more than 5,200 journals published worldwide. PMC full-text journals, which number over 3,200, account for more than 8 million citations in PubMed. First, some background. Medline started in 1879 as a print bibliographic index of medical articles called Index Medicus. This was a physical index with copies found most often in research and medical libraries. It then evolved to take on several other formats and names, including via CD-ROM in 1971. In 1997, PubMed was created as a way to access Medline through the internet. Now, let's review PMC's development. It was established in 2000 at the beginning of the open access movement. At that time, PMC was exclusively an online archive of journal content. A journal was required to supply their complete contents to PMC. In 2005, the NIH began encouraging, though not yet requiring, researchers to submit their articles to PMC to give the public access. This was when PMC took on a second role as a repository for peer-reviewed funded research results and introduced author manuscripts into the collection. Since that time, public access has continued to evolve, first becoming mandatory at NIH in 2008, and then in 2013 expanding to cover all large research funders in the US government. As I mentioned earlier, it expanded again in August 2022, and all federal agencies must make taxpayer-funded publications and research available by the end of 2025. At this point, you may be asking why NLM has two separate journal databases. Medline and PMC have distinct purposes and characteristics, some of which are shown here on this table. Both databases contain peer-reviewed journal literature, and their citations are searchable in PubMed. However, only Medline citations in PubMed are indexed with NLM's medical subject headings, or MeSH terms. PMC contains the full text of the article in fulfillment of its dual role as an archive, whereas Medline only contains citation data, which is information such as abstracts, titles, and other metadata. Both databases are part of the NLM collection, and for that reason, journals in both must meet the requirements of the NLM collection covered in the previous slides. This includes having a biomedical focus. As you saw on the timelines, Medline is a much older database, and for this reason, it makes up the majority of content in PubMed. Finally, both databases have rigorous scientific evaluation processes. In the next part of this presentation, I'll explain where these two journal selection processes, highlighting where they overlap and where they diverge. These are the steps for a journal to be included in Medline or PMC. First, a publisher or journal must submit an application. Then, NLM staff complete an initial application screening. Next, journals are reviewed for their scientific quality. And finally, a publisher completes a technical requirements check. Let's begin with the initial application screening. This slide compares and contrasts the initial application screening requirements for Medline and PMC. Medline journals are required to have a minimum of 40 peer-reviewed articles, and PMC is required to have 25. Medline requires English titles and abstracts, while PMC accepts full-text English and Spanish articles. Both should be able to provide electronic access according to the NLM's electronic access policy, unless the journal is print only. Finally, Medline requires that journals have been publishing a minimum of 12 months, while PMC has no minimum. The next step is the scientific quality process. This is a rigorous, multi-step process in which many factors are assessed and involves a review of the journal content by NLM staff and external experts. Let's review who our external reviewers are. For Medline, this review is done by the Literature Selection Technical Review Committee, or LISTRIC. LISTRIC has 15 members, including medical librarians and scientists, and it meets 3 times a year. On average, Medline reviews 300 applications per year. PMC's review is completed by 2 expert consultants, including a medical librarian and scientist. Many are former LISTRIC members. On average, PMC reviews 500 applications per year. The LISTRIC and PMC expert consultants make recommendations to the NLM, and then NLM makes the final decision about a journal. Next, we'll review criteria Medline and PMC staff and external experts use to evaluate their scientific rigor of a journal. NLM views each journal comprehensively. This slide outlines some criteria we use during the review. First, NLM uses the definition of scientific rigor provided by the NIH Office of Extramural Research, which defines scientific rigor as the strict application of the scientific method to ensure robust and unbiased experimental design, methodology, analysis, interpretation, and reporting of results. This includes full transparency in reporting experimental details so that others may reproduce and extend the findings. Editorial quality is considered for both databases and includes factors such as writing clarity and figure or table quality. Additionally, we look for detailed policies and evidence that the ethics policy is being enforced. Medline goes beyond scientific rigor to also consider things like significance and novelty of the research, its website functionality, and journal impact, which is based on internal criteria and not an impact factor. In fact, NLM does not consider metrics from other organizations, such as impact factor, citation metrics, or status in other indexes when evaluating a journal. If the journal passes the scientific quality review for Medline or PMC, then it goes on to the final step of ensuring it meets all technical requirements. Journals and publishers upload their own content to Medline and PMC. This process is more advanced and time-consuming for PMC as they must provide the full text content, images, and supplemental materials, whereas Medline journals only have to provide citation data and have the option to provide conflict of interest statements. Medline also has archiving requirements for electronic journals. These journals must be archived in an acceptable repository to ensure long-term preservation and access to the content. At present, the acceptable repositories are CLOCKS, Portico, and PMC. We do realize that a publisher's business practices or a journal's policies may change over time. If a journal undergoes significant changes, the NLM may reevaluate it for continued collection. These include significant changes to the journal's editorial board, its aims and scope, its publisher, or its scientific or editorial quality. If an issue is found, NLM may reevaluate the journal to ensure that it continues to meet the scientific quality standard for PMC or Medline. The reevaluation process will largely look the same as the journal selection process for new titles. If the publisher is no longer meeting best practices, then we may decide to not collect the titles from this publisher going forward. It is important to note that if a decision is made to no longer collect a title in Medline or PMC, the records already publicly available will remain publicly available for archival purposes. To find a list of all journals currently indexed in Medline, go to the NLM catalog and search using the search string currently indexed. Or you can use the filter on the sidebar that says Journals Currently Indexed in Medline. To find a list of PubMed Central journals, click on the Show Additional Filters link from the NLM Catalog Filters menu, select PubMed/PMC journals, and click Show. There you will find the options to filter to PubMed Central journals or forthcoming journals. After you select the PMC Central Journals filter, you'll see a search string appear in the Search Details box. We know that the currently indexed search string will pull up all Medline journals. The journal's PMC search string will retrieve all PMC journals. So you can either use the filters or the search string to limit a catalog search to PMC journals. To find all journals currently being added to PubMed, we can use this search string, currently indexed or journals PMC. Currently indexed will pull in Medline journals, and journals PMC will pull in PMC journals. And don't forget to combine them with OR. In this next section of the presentation, we'll be talking about some of the other components of PMC. Today, PMC contains more than 10 million publicly accessible articles. We already discussed the over 8 million articles that are formally published in a scholarly journal that is archived in PMC and goes through the selection process we just reviewed. Next, we'll discuss two other components of PMC: author manuscripts that have been peer-reviewed and accepted for publication in a journal, and preprint versions of articles that have been made public prior to peer review. We'll start with author manuscripts. Any author manuscripts in PMC will have corresponding citations in PubMed. The author manuscript is the version of a paper that has been peer-reviewed and accepted for publication by the journal. This version should include all changes made during the peer review process. Author manuscripts come from a variety of journals because of the large number of funders who have named PMC as their central repository for funded research. At this time, PMC serves as the repository for 10 U.S. federal agencies. These include the major funding agencies within the Department of Health and Human Services, like the NIH, CDC, and FDA. PMC also partners with some private funders like the Gates Foundation and the Health Research Alliance. And through Europe PMC serves as the repository for 35 European funders. It's easy to identify author manuscripts in PMC because a banner at the top explains what a manuscript is. The paper's status as a manuscript runs along the entire page. Each manuscript includes the funding agency's logo. The citation includes the paper's manuscript status. And the DOI and a link to the published version are provided in a yellow box below the citation. You can also link from the journal title at the top to the NLM catalog to view the status of a journal. To navigate to the NLM catalog from a PMC record, click on the journal title in the top left and select View in NLM Catalog from the drop-down menu. Check the current indexing status to learn more about the indexing status and why you may be seeing this article in PubMed or PMC. Next, let's look at an example of a journal that is not currently indexed for Medline and not in the NLM collection. Instead, it includes a note that citations are for articles where the manuscript was deposited in PubMed Central PMC in compliance with public access policies. Next, I'll briefly review the preprint pilot that is making NIH-funded preprints available via PMC. Preprints are complete and public drafts of scientific documents that have not yet been peer-reviewed. In June 2020, the NLM launched Phase 1 of the NIH preprint pilot to focus on preprints from NIH-funded research relating to COVID-19. Phase 2 launched in January 2023 and includes any NIH-funded work. There are currently over 18,000 preprints in PMC. Because these preprints are available through PMC, then they are discoverable in PubMed. Preprints are clearly labeled in PubMed and PMC with a green label across the top of the record that includes a link to more information about the pilot. Finally, let's take a look at the last source of PubMed records, the NCBI bookshelf. There are currently about 12,000 items in the NCBI bookshelf. The pie chart on this slide illustrates how many different types of documents bookshelf contains, like systematic reviews, clinical guidelines, textbooks, and reference materials. It includes works published by the World Health Organization, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Drug Quality, the Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technologies in Health, and other authoritative publishers. Content is added to the archive through direct deposits by participating publishers, deposits by partnering, funding, or sponsoring organizations, and conversion projects with NIH-sponsored authors and editors. Records for many items in Bookshelf are included in PubMed. After a publisher submits an application, there are 3 review steps to include content in Bookshelf. These should look familiar by now. There is an initial application screening, a scientific quality review, and a technical quality review. All content in Bookshelf is peer-reviewed, falls within the scope of the NLM Collection Development Guidelines, and is reviewed by NLM for scientific quality and data integrity. Bookshelf content in PubMed has a Bookshelf ID and is labeled with free books and documents. Clicking on the Bookshelf ID will take you to the entry in Bookshelf. That concludes the section on the NCBI Bookshelf. To recap what you find in PubMed, The vast majority of citations in PubMed are from Medline journals. Medline consists of citations for journals in the biomedical and life sciences. The Medline database accounts for more than 31 million of PubMed's 37 million records. We are currently indexing more than 5,200 journals for Medline. Those citations from Medline journals are the only citations in PubMed that have our medical subject headings applied. PubMed also includes citations for the full-text articles that are in PubMed Central PMC, our free full-text archive. There are currently more than 3,200 journals being added to PMC. About 1/4 of PMC journals are Medline journals. Combined, there are more than 7,700 journals that are currently being regularly added to PubMed either through Medline or PMC, or both. Author manuscripts in PMC are records for individual articles that are reporting on funded research. These articles are submitted to comply with public access policy mandates. These records are added to PubMed when the article is published. About 90% of NIH-funded author manuscripts in PMC are published in Medline journals. We're currently piloting the availability of NIH-funded preprints in PMC and therefore PubMed. And finally, there are also records for 12,000 free online technical reports, systematic reviews, and other monographs in biomedicine from the NCBI bookshelf. We reviewed how to find the indexing status of a journal and how to identify an author manuscript, a preprint, and bookshelf material in PubMed. I'll talk just briefly about guidance to help authors and researchers at your institution navigate the complex landscape of scholarly journal publishing today. We know these issues of journal and article quality are not specific to NLM. We also know that these issues, while daunting, are an opportunity for librarians. In fact, in 2016, the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, issued consumer guidance about journal quality concerns, and they directed researchers to librarians. You are the experts here. This is not just a selection issue for libraries, but also an education opportunity. Helping your researchers assess a journal's transparency, quality, and peer review process could be a very valuable asset to your institution. The FTC Consumer Guidance also offers a link where researchers can report concerns about a publisher's business practices. If you're looking for a simple resource to share with your researchers, there is Think, Check, Submit. It's a checklist researchers can use to assess the credentials of a journal or publisher. The resource was established by organizations from different areas of the publishing ecosystem, including publishers, professional organizations, the ISSN Center, and librarian groups. And that range of knowledge is reflected in the guidance they provide in a very easy-to-use way. The NLM refers to specific guidelines from various organizations for assessing the quality of a journal that you can also use and share with your research communities. For systematic reviews and meta-analyses, refer to the PRISMA guidelines. For case reports, review the CARE Case Report guidelines. For clinical trials, refer to the CONSORT guidelines. And for animal studies, ARRIVE provides guidance. And one other resource for you is Equator. The Equator, Enhancing the Quality and Transparency of Health Research, is an international initiative that seeks to improve the reliability and value of published health research literature by promoting transparent and accurate reporting and the wider use of robust reporting guidelines. It carries the tagline, "A one-stop shop for writing and publishing high-impact health research." It advances the work done by individual groups over the last 15 years and is the first coordinated attempt to tackle the problems of inadequate reporting systematically on a global scale. Additionally, NLM maintains an adapted format of Equator with brief descriptions of each paper type. To summarize what we'd like you to take away from this presentation, in addition to Medline and PMC participating journals, PubMed also includes records for individual articles that are in PMC to comply with public access policies, as well as records for select content in the NCBI bookshelf and preprints of NIH-funded research from the NIH preprint pilot. Selection processes are different for different NLM products, but include a check for minimum requirements, a scientific quality review, and a technical review. Acceptance into the NLM collection is a prerequisite for inclusion in Medline, PubMed Central at the journal level, and bookshelf. A final note. These three resources are scientific literature databases offered to the public by the U.S. National Library of Medicine. Once publications are selected for inclusion in a database, NLM does not review, evaluate, or judge the quality of individual articles and relies on the scientific publishing process to identify and address problems through published comments, corrections, and retractions. The presence of any article, book, or document in these databases does not imply an endorsement of or concurrence with the contents by NLM, the National Institutes of Health, or the U.S. federal government. If you do have quality concerns about particular articles in PubMed, we encourage you to contact us and contact the editor or publisher. Librarians have an important role in educating and assisting authors and researchers in discerning high-quality publications. Please let us at NLM know how we can work together in this endeavor.